Behold! That heap the Ercol hill, where booms a dread nocturne. There lies a king of worms, a king forsaken, and whatever form he may have taken beneath the earth, once upon a time he was a giant.
Now this giant was not a beastly monster such as you may have heard of in fairy stories. No, this was a time when giants were wise and cunning and well versed in the ways of the earth and the sky. They shaped the earth, they shaped its wonders. And this giant was called Ercol, and his twin brother was called Wrekon. And together they shared an incredible bond. They were inseparable. They shared almost everything. They shared in exile from their distant home. They shared in their ambition to be kings of a new home. They shared even in a single shovel with which to shape a land, to make their own. And there they hoped they would share a crown. And it was they who first set foot in the wasteland that was ancient Shropshire. It was flat for as far as the eye could see, and dry, barren and lifeless. And here they plunged their shovel into the ground, and passing it between them, they dug a trench that stretched across the plain. And the spoils of this trench they piled high into a mountain, their own mountain, from which to rule together. And they stood atop the mountain, and they commanded the clouds to burst with rain, and the rain filled the trench, and that trench became a river which would make the land rich. And it was now that they stood triumphant that they decided to begin to talk about how they would rule together. And this is where everything changed, for what they had not shared was what was in here, their inner thoughts, their ideas. And now that they did, they realized that on the inside they were utterly different. They began to argue, and it was inevitable, I suppose, that they began to fight. And this was no childish skirmish such as they had engaged in when they were young. This was a clashing of two great thunderstorms, manifest in fist and tooth and nail. And it went on, and it seemed their battle would never end, but it was Ercol who seized that shovel with which they had achieved such great wonders, and he wielded it as a weapon against his brother. He cast it across the top of the mountain towards Wrekon, and it would have pierced right through him if he had not leapt aside just in time. Instead, it crashed into a rock behind him and split it in two. And then as Wrekon was recovering, he saw that a raven that flew overhead dived down towards Ercol's face and started pecking viciously at his eye. And such was the pain that Ercol shed a single tear of such weight that it plunged into the rock beneath him and carved out a pool that would never dry. And he clinged at his eye, desperate, in pain. And then Wrekon took his chance and crept up behind him, and with both his fists he dealt one final blow to his brother's head. And Ercol fell, and he toppled down the side of the mountain until he lay there in a broken heap at the bottom. And Wrekon was distraught to see his brother lie there still. And he gathered up all the broken rock and earth that they had churned up in their fight, and he piled it over his brother's body, creating a second hill to sit alongside the first. And then, I do not know what happened to Wrekon. It is not recorded, but I think perhaps he must have retreated back to the top of the mountain that would later bear his name, where perhaps he withered away to nothing. And over time, that river enriched the land, and the Wrekon and the Ercol were covered in grass and moss and trees. And when at last the land was inherited by the race of men, they thought it simply a humble hill, until they heard something there, beneath the stone, beneath the grass and the trees. They would hear in the dead of night a sound, a great booming, groaning sound beneath the rock. Something was calling out. For you see, there are some things which may sleep but never die. And he stirs still beneath the earth, even now. Now it is silent, but come here in the dead of night, and I assure you, you will hear it. Calling out, bringing people here to dig, like worms descending into the earth. Perhaps someday someone will dig just deep enough to find him. Until that day, here upon the Ercol hill there booms a dread nocturne, and here he shall remain, a king of naught but worms.